Well, a lot is happening around the world, especially in the last about 12 or 24 hours, but specifically affecting Canada. We're going to sum it into these three topics that we're going to be taking a look at. Mark Carney says that Muslim values are Canadian values. That has a lot of controversy, as you can expect. Also, Modi, the Prime Minister of India, is invited back to Canada for this upcoming G7 meeting or G7 summit, and it seems like he might actually take Carney up on that offer. And then Joe Rogan sat down with FBI Director Kash Patel, and they really came to the conclusion that Canada is a massive security risk, not only to the world, but specifically to America. So yeah, Canada is a bit of a shit show. Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another video, everybody. Before we get into it, I do want to encourage you all to hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't yet already. It would really help grow the channel. And before we get into this video, I do have a message from today's sponsor. When I prepare my videos, I make sure that I know both sides of the story. That's why I use Ground News, and that's why I've partnered with them. Ground News is a website and app that pulls sources from thousands of different websites across the internet, organizes them by story, and shows you a visual breakdown of the political bias, ownership, and reliability. Take this story that's barely getting any attention to South Korea's bold arms deal to supply Canada with fighter jets and submarines instead of the United States. You'd think something like this would be on the front page, but apparently it's not. Ground News shows us that over 30 sources have covered the actual story. 67% of it is actually coming from the right. Left-leaning media outlets like CBC and Global News do cover the story, but they keep it surface level. Meanwhile, right-leaning outlets like 1945 dig deeper to point out the serious concerns about Canada's vulnerabilities. I actually found the story my favorite spot of Ground News, the blind spot feed, which is where I go to find out which side is or isn't covering the story. Subscribe to my link down in the description or use the QR code on screen to get 40% off the Vantage plan today. That's the exact same plan that I use. Thank you, Ground News, for sponsoring today's video. We're going to take a look at things in sequence of order that I mentioned at the start of this video. Starting things off with Mark Carney, who is going viral for a lot of the wrong reasons. On the Western Standard X account, you have Carney says all Canadians must come together around the values of Eid. These are Muslim values. These are Canadian values. This has 3.2 million views. And you can see some of the comments here have insane engagement, more likes than the actual post itself. When did slavery, child marriage, gang rape, and all that stuff become Canadian values? Let's see what Mark Carney actually had to say, though.
This is a special day, and the message of Eid resonates in this room, across this city, and I may say it should resonate with all Canadians. It's a story that some of us hear with slightly different nomenclature, whether the prophet is called Ibrahim or Abraham, Ishmael or Isaac. The lessons and values of Eid are the same. Canada, our Canada, is a diverse country, proud home to different languages, different beliefs, different cultures. Those are differences that make us unique and make us strong. We can pray differently, we can gather in different places of worship, but all of us come together, all of us must come together around the values of Eid, the values of community, of generosity, and yes, of sacrifice. These are Muslim values. These are Canadian values.
Oh, now some of the controversy stems around the things that I read in the top comment of this video that is going absolutely viral. Now, those outlooks on those values of being a Muslim are on the more extreme side. It's not obviously supported, adopted, or encouraged by your average person. But again, to just start comparing a culture and religion from another part of the world and say that their values are identical to those of Canadian values is a liberal thing to say. I don't know how else to kind of say that. I mean, what if the foot was on, or the shoe was on the other foot? What if in a Muslim country you started saying Christian values are the same values as us? Would that bode over well, or do you think that people would immediately reject that? So again, when you're comparing apples to apples, you can see that the pushback is, you know, it's actually less pushback for this of what Mark Carney said than if it were to be said in another part of the world, saying Christian values are the same as those in a Muslim country. I'm just going to leave it there, but I'd love to know what you guys think down below in the comments. Speaking of other parts of the world, we have to now take a look at India and how Prime Minister Modi coming here is a pretty huge development.
Canada has also invited India's Prime Minister to the G7 summit in Kananaskis, Alberta later this month. Mark Carney and India's Narendra Modi spoke earlier today. Now, according to the PM's office, the two leaders discussed the long-standing relationship between Canada and India. In a message on X, Modi says he's looking forward to attending the summit. Ties again have been frayed recently between India and Canada. That's because India's government has been accused of murder, extortion, and targeting Sikh activists in Canada. India has denied those allegations. And also keep in mind that India is not a member of the G7, but has been invited to the summit every year since 2019. This afternoon, the Prime Minister spoke about the importance of cooperation with India in all areas, including trade and diplomacy.
India, the fifth largest economy in the world, effectively the most populous country in the world, central to a number of those supply chains, at the heart of a number of those supply chains, so it makes sense. And in addition, bilaterally, we have now agreed, importantly, to continued law enforcement dialogue. So there's been
Right. So we're going to hear more about this in the Joe Rogan piece, which is, I mean, if you really want to skip forward, you can find it later in this video. But what he's going to be getting at, and the reason why India being invited to the G7 this year and accepting that invitation not only shows a tradition that's been going on since 2019, whether you agree with it or not, it's still a thing that seems to be going on. But the war on drugs, specifically fentanyl, that's coming from China. China is distributing fentanyl across the world, but in different pieces, in different small little pieces. So together, these shipments, you know, you can't just say, well, they're creating fentanyl. They're not. They're creating the pieces that when you put together does create that drug. But now they've been finding workarounds from shipping it directly to America into India, and then it's coming into the ports of Vancouver, also in Mexico, and making its way into America. And that is a big reason why having the India PM come here to meet with Carney, where we obviously have a problem with China infiltrating our shipping containers and distributing those. It's not Compound X anymore. They said they don't do that, but it's a dozen different types of compounds and different pieces of the puzzle that make ultimately fentanyl. Having everybody who's been affected by China's infiltration under one area to discuss this behind closed doors is probably going to be a good step in the right direction. That's just what I'm anticipating.
Some progress on that. It recognizes issues of accountability. I extended the invitation to Prime Minister Modi in that context, and he has accepted.
So what impact could this renewed communication have on Canada's global standing and its relationships with India and China, and not to mention the United States? Well, to dig deeper into all of this, joining me in studio now is Ben Rosewell. He's the convener of the Circle for Democratic Solidarity, and he's a former Canadian diplomat. Mr. Rosewell, really great to have you in studio. Thank you for coming in.
Nice to be here.
There's so much to pull apart, sir. Looking ahead to the G7 summit, this invitation extended. not unusual, as I mentioned, since 2019, but the fact that Canada's relationship with India has been so frayed in recent years, what do you make of our new Prime Minister extending this olive branch?
Well, this is a moment of major global realignment in the wake of the United States fundamentally changing its system of government and its relationship with the rest of the world. The key question in Kananaskis will be, can the free world survive the loss of its leader? Prime Minister Carney has laid out one idea about how that might come to pass, which would be to bring the remaining large liberal democracies together into a new grouping of reliable trading partners and reliable allies. That group is going to need to reach out to other countries of the world outside of its sort of inner core in order to maintain security and prosperity for its citizens. And so that's where I think all cards are on the table, and the invitation to Prime Minister Modi makes sense within that geopolitical realignment.
It does raise some concern, even some ire among some Canadians, because there is this diplomatic and legal entanglement with the accusations that people linked to the Indian government were operating in schemes to murder Canadian citizens. And in fact, as far as we know from Canadian security forces, very legitimate evidence that in fact senior officials within the Indian government knew that there was a setup and a plot, and in fact said go ahead with the plot to murder a Canadian citizen linked to what they describe as a terrorist movement operating here in Canada. The question for many Canadians becomes, how do you create that balancing act of needing to work with a hugely developing nation, a democratic state, flawed as it may be to some, but also maintaining our integrity and saying there's a line and we will not permit India to cross it?
I'm not sure it's so much of a balance as a question of priorities. And for Canada, I think Canada's governments, one after the other, have made it absolutely clear the top priority is the safety, the security, the liberty of our citizens.
Yeah, they're doing a great job when you find multiple kingpins or whatever the heck they're called that could kill 90+ million people in British Columbia alone. Yeah, great job keeping the Canadian people safe. I mean, I guess they kept them safe by finding it, but still the fact that these, drug pens are being established in the masses is not good at all.
I would imagine that that's been made abundantly clear to Prime Minister Modi in the invitation, that the RCMP investigation will go ahead, and no one really needs to question the willingness of the Government of Canada to stand up for its citizens. I mean, the extraordinary steps that were taken to denounce the Indian government on the floor of the House of Commons, that's a step that only a strong and self-confident government or a country can do.
But let me jump.
Trudeau absolutely ruined our relationship with India. I mean, horribly. I don't even know if it's fixable. The fact that he's coming here, I mean, if Modi really wanted to have a power move, he could have said, nah, I don't want to come to Canada. You guys need to sort your stuff out and figure out what side of history you want to be on, right? And I wouldn't have blamed him for that at all. In fact, I probably had a decent amount of respect for him. I still obviously have, I don't want to say respect for the Indian Prime Minister, but it's cool that he's coming here, I suppose. We should be working with India to the best of our ability. They are one of the largest economies in the entire world, largest democracy, if you want to call it that, in the entire world. And they are also a key player in stopping the fentanyl war that China has created on the entire world, because China, again, is shipping a lot of that into India, as we're going to find out in a few moments from the Joe Rogan podcast.
Because it was a government under a different prime minister. So are the moves we're seeing by Mark Carney a means of distinguishing himself from the previous Liberal government?
I would hope that any Prime Minister of Canada and any government would stand up for the security of citizens and stand up to a country that's accused of murdering Canadian citizens on Canadian soil. That case is working its way through the courts, and the diplomatic cost has already been imposed. The government of India, because of its refusal to collaborate with the government of Canada in the investigation, and really to refuse to have very basic diplomatic communications, ended up getting kind of embarrassed in front of the entire world when Prime Minister Trudeau stood up. I don't think that Prime Minister Carney gains anything by distinguishing himself from another Prime Minister who stood up for Canadian citizens. Rather, I think we need to think of that as a threshold over which no government would ever pass. But should we be able able to work with a foreign government and have them respect Canada's sovereignty, not interfere in the domestic affairs of Canada. We do have other responsibilities for our citizens, especially having lost the reliable partner of the United States. We do need trade. We do need security partners. And so once that threshold is respected, that Canadian citizens are safe and that their liberty is assured, which was the problem with another major Asian power, then I do think it's important for Canadian citizens that our government open up trading relationships and other diplomatic engagements with large foreign countries.
I was going to ask you.
I mean, we definitely need new trading partners, more trading partners. We should be working with America as well to better our relationships, but working with India to try and mend a lot of the damage that's been caused and get back to a good relationship with that entire population, with trade, might not be the worst thing. In fact, it'd probably work in our best interest. But again, that's my opinion, folks. I'd love to know yours. Now we're going to take a look at Joe Rogan sitting down with the FBI Director Kash Patel and what they have to say about Canada and how Canada's become a huge national security risk. Here we go.
The biggest, talk about the devil pulling the wool over the world's eyes. They're like, we don't make fentanyl. They're right. They don't. They just give you all the ingredients for it and ship it to Mexico. And then what they did was, to trick the world, they came out and said, hey, we're going to not sell precursor X. They're like, so now we're out of the fentanyl trade entirely. The problem is there's 14 other precursors you can use to make fentanyl, and they're still shipping all of those. So what we did when I got to the Bureau is we stood up this massive enterprise to go after fentanyl precursor companies in mainland China. And they're probably not going to like that. And what they're doing now to get cute is they're shipping that stuff not straight to here. They're going to places like India, and I'm also doing operations in India. And they're having the Mexican cartels now make this fentanyl down in Mexico still. But, instead of going right up the southern border and into America, you know what they're doing? They're flying it into Vancouver. They're taking the precursors up to Canada, manufacturing it up there, and doing their global distribution routes from up there because we were being so effective down south.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's a huge lift, but part of it is Americans just don't understand the depth and depravity of fentanyl. But what's worse is fentanyl. You don't hear fentanyl deaths in China. You don't hear fentanyl deaths in India. You don't really hear fentanyl deaths in England, Australia, New Zealand, our Five Eyes partners in Canada. The Chinese, in my opinion,
That is incorrect. There's a lot of fent death here in Canada. It is very, very much a problem in this country. Is it as bad as America? Probably not, because they got 10 times the population. But yes, it is very bad here.
CCP have used it as a directed approach because we are their adversary, and they don't like us, and we don't like what they're doing when it comes to fentanyl. And their long-term game is this. How do I, in my opinion, kneecap the United States of America, our largest adversary? Well, why don't we go and take out generations of young men and women who might grow up to serve in the United States military or become a cop or become a teacher? And that's what they're doing when you wipe out tens of thousands of Americans a year. It's a long-term plan for them.
Oh, that is such a dark thing.
It is, but we're on it.
And as you can see, they are doing that successfully. And I mean, China is successfully pulling off exactly what they are looking to do, which is cause harm to the West, destabilize the West, poison and kill as many young people as possible. And it's working. There's a huge addiction problem. And what does our government do as a response? Well, instead of solving drugs and the issue, Canadian government says, well, you know what? The government's going to make the drugs, and then we're just going to create safe supply areas for people that are addicted to come and get our stuff. But the problem with that is then homeless people and crackheads are going to these safe supply spots. They're getting all of the goodies from the government, the good, clean stuff, and then they're selling it on the black market for this stuff from China, and it's killing heaps and heaps and waves of people in the masses. It's a huge problem here in Canada, and it's obviously still a huge problem in America. And the fact that Canada hasn't really, at least under Justin Trudeau, didn't really want to play ball with America just goes to show that we don't take this seriously. In British Columbia, we don't take it seriously. And at the federal level, we don't take it seriously. And it seems like Kash Patel and the FBI director, they're doing everything they can to make sure that we take it seriously. So all we can hope with this new leadership is that we actually start to take it seriously. But I want to pass the question off to you. Do you think that the Liberals 2.0 now under Mark Carney are going to take this seriously, or do you think it's going to be another Justin Trudeau sweep it under the rug kind of thing? I'd love to know what you guys think.
Jacked up the price to exorbitant amounts of money. They're not making a ton of money. And so it's an all-of-government approach. So I'm working with guys like the Secretary of Treasury to do sanctions on some of these companies, right? Then I'm working with our Five Eyes partners, and our Five Eyes are the 5 English-speaking countries in the world. You know, Canada, America, England, New Zealand, and Australia. Right? We share intelligence. We share classified intelligence on this stuff. So I'm asking them. I said, "Hey, it's not just affecting us; it will affect you and your population. The CCP just hasn't directed it at you yet, and they know that." And I said, guys, I need your help. I'm looking at intelligence reporting that shows fentanyl precursors are now in your country. The fentanyl itself isn't being deployed into your country, but it's there being manufactured. And so I'm asking for their help to shut down those factories and production facilities. And I'm asking the Mexican government's help to come and say, hey, your drug trafficking organizations are now exporting the manufacturing of fentanyl and getting creative in the ways in which they obtain fentanyl precursors. So they'll say, oh, we didn't get it from China. We got it from India. We got it from, you know, wherever. And
it's this type of teamwork from these countries, our allies, that is really going to help fight this fight and make sure that the West is stabilized and not destabilized.
I literally just got off the phone with the Indian government. I said, I need your help. This stuff's coming into your country, and then they're moving it from your country because India is not consuming fentanyl. They're not. No one's dying over there from fentanyl. But I need you and your help. So my FBI is over there working with the heads of their government, law enforcement authorities to say, we're going to find these companies that buy it, and we're going to shut them down. We're going to sanction them. We're going to arrest them where we can. We're going to indict them in America if we can. We're going to indict them in India if we can. Start indicting in places like Canada and the UK and England and Australia. This is a global problem. And the reason it's gotten so bad is because nobody did anything for 4 years. You know, people are like, how do they stand this up? Well, if you give the CCP, who has an endless amount of money to deploy in human capital, that's what happens. It metastasizes.
Why didn't anybody do anything for 4 years? Have you been able to figure that out?
Look, to me, I'm a national security guy, and anything that kills 100,000 people a year is a national security crisis, right? It's what we call a tier 1 threat. And the last administration did not classify the drug trafficking enterprise as a prime threat against the American people. And so what happens is you reorient the system of intelligence collection operations. I mean, I'm not making this up. They said climate change is our biggest priority. DEI is our biggest priority. I mean, you guys have heard this, and you've had guests on that say it. But these are the ramifications in real life. I only have X amount of people that can target something, right? Same with the CIA, same with the DOD. But if
so, it's not even a myth that, like, we've just gone so woke that we are literally killing ourselves by focusing on feelings instead of facts. And that's kind of where politics has taken a turn, especially here in Canada, is we are so focused on feelings, the feelings of people, making sure that everybody or minority groups or newcomers are happy and that their feelings are met and satisfied, instead of focusing on the facts that there are countries and organizations outside of Canada that are always going to be trying to cause us harm. What are we going to do about it? What are we going to do about it when they're not outside of Canada and they're here in Canada, ripping us apart within? That is a question that we have to ask ourselves, especially when it comes time to vote at the next election. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, it'd be super awesome for you guys to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and just remember that supporting the channel sponsor is also a way of supporting the channel. And I'll see you in another video. Bye for now.